Hey, good evening. I'm David Wildstein, the editor of the New Jersey Globe. Welcome to debates between the candidates for the New Jersey State Senate in the 25th District. This is a debate between Senator Anthony Bucco, the Republican nominee, and Rupande Mehta, the Democratic nominee. This is an hour-long debate. It's sponsored by the New Jersey Globe. It's coming to you virtually with each candidate at their own location. At a time when a global pandemic has impacted all of us, this virtual format allows the two Senate candidates to interact on key issues facing the state of New Jersey without putting anyone at risk. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make an opening statement. After that, I will ask a series of questions related to state and local issues for this campaign for state senate. Respectfully, I ask both candidates to stick to their allotted time. If a candidate goes too long, I'll simply hold my hand up. If that doesn't work, then I'll interrupt. I want to make it clear these questions are mine. I have not shared them with anyone. And questions will alternate between the two candidates at my discretion. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. I reserve the option of a follow-up question before moving on. And I want to explain that my job as moderator is to be the moderator, to not take sides, to not give my opinion. I'm not a participant in this debate. I'm simply a moderator, so I'll just moderate. I'll keep the debate moving along, and I will look to each of you to make sure that what your opponents say is based on fact. If a candidate is attacked during the response, his or her opponent will receive an additional 30 seconds to respond. Each candidate will have a chance to ask their opponent one question. Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask that question, and their opponent will have 60 seconds to respond. The candidates will also have 90 seconds for a closing statement. And before this debate started, we conducted a virtual coin toss online. Ms. Mehta won that coin toss. She has opted to give the second opening statement and the second closing statement. So I'll ask Senator Bucco to begin by giving his opening statement.
Thank you, David. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Globe for hosting this event tonight. As many understand, this last year has been a difficult year for me. It is never easy when you lose a parent. It's even harder when your parent served with you in the legislature and essentially was my best friend. But that is why we're here tonight. As a result of my father's passing, I am forced to run again this year to fulfill his unexpired term. It's a legacy that I'm proud of and honored to continue. I'm also proud of my bipartisan record of introducing common sense legislation that's resulted in over 100 bills becoming law in New Jersey. Laws like the creation of the Class 3 police officer to protect our school children in houses of worship, securing $500,000 of permanent funding year after year for Lake Apacon to protect the lake and to support the regional economy. My safe dating legislation that gives students the opportunity to learn of what is and isn't a safe relationship. My bipartisan COVID relief legislation that we introduced on a bipartisan basis at the beginning of this COVID crisis and has helped the economy and our local municipalities continue to operate. And working across the aisle with Congresswoman Cheryl and Governor Cody to secure an additional $7 million in COVID relief funding for Morris County. I'm also proud of the constituent services and the work that my staff and I have been able to do during this crisis, clearing over 1,500 UI claims, problem UI claims for people that desperately needed the money and were out of work, navigating motor vehicle issues for seniors and folks with underlying conditions, licensing healthcare providers to get them to the front line quicker at the height of the pandemic, and securing meals for frontline workers, battered women's shelters, St. Peter's Orphanage, the New Jersey Fireman's Home, and many more. This has been a very difficult year for all of us. It's been trying times, but I've done what I've always done as an elected official. I've rolled up my sleeve and I've gone to work. I look to continue that in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Mehta, I'll ask you to make your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Rupande Mehta, and I'm running for State Senate in District 25. I would like to thank the New Jersey Globe for holding this debate and to all of you for watching. My story is a story of dreams. Born and raised in Mumbai, India, I came to the United States 18 years ago in search of a better life. Leaving behind a life of abuse, I came searching for freedom, economic independence, and survival. After getting my MBA, I came to New York and started working in the corporate sector. Met my husband, and soon after, we got married. My life's proudest moment came in 2012 when our only daughter, Sophie, was born, followed by my second proudest moment in 2017 when I raised my right hand and became a United States citizen. I am running because I believe representation matters, and Anthony Bucco is failing us. Appointed Senator Bucco says he works across the aisle to get things done, but then says things can't get done because Democrats are in charge. Chris Christie was governor for 8 years, and Senator Bucco worked hand in hand with him to cut funding for women's health care, and he voted against legislation that would prevent wage discrimination. Now, with Phil Murphy as governor, Senator Bucco has voted against providing relief funds for small business owners and frontline workers in the middle of a global pandemic. On Friday night, Senator Bucco said, the easiest way to find out if something is a bad piece of legislation is to watch across the aisle and see how those in competitive districts vote. That statement should speak volumes to the people casting a vote in this election. Senator Bucco is watching how everyone else is voting instead of making decisions solely based on the needs of his district. That is simply unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator, I'm going to go to you for the first question. New Jersey is seeing a significant spike in COVID cases, leading some to think that months after seeing the highest virus fatality in the country, a second wave is coming. Over the last 6 months, you have strongly urged Governor Murphy to reopen the state. Do you still believe New Jersey's businesses should remain open, and should businesses and restaurants be allowed to open at a higher capacity?
In the beginning of this pandemic, I worked closely with the Morris County Chamber of Commerce and a panel of nonpartisan experts to look at the virus and look at the economy in general, and come up with a risk-based analysis on how businesses can open safely. We prepared that report and we gave it to the governor. And in fact, shortly after it was delivered, he began to open up some of the economy under the terms and conditions as we suggested. There are ways to operate this economy safely. This COVID crisis is real. People need to wear masks and they need to be careful. But we also can't shut the economy down completely. We have to be careful. We have to make sure that precautions are taken and the rules are followed. But once that occurs, we showed in that Morris County reopening plan that it can be done safely. And that was based on science. And that was a report, quite frankly, that my opponent opposed. And she criticized me for it, for suggesting that any business could open. And that's just not, that's simply bad policy.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mehta, let me ask you to respond to that also.
Thank you very much. So I do think that we have a second wave coming. In fact, experts are suggesting that we are well on our way for a second wave and spike in COVID cases again. As of the 23rd of October, Morris County has seen a total of 8,737 cases of COVID-19, with Dover at 875 and Morristown at 633. What we need to do is have a very methodical step-by-step approach towards opening up the economy. I completely understand the pain that is felt by small business owners throughout the district and the state. I've spoken with several of them, and many have told me of their concerns, that they need to fulfill their payroll and they need to meet their ends meet as well. I understand that. But at the same time, when we're talking about something as deadly as this virus, we need to make sure we rely only on healthcare experts. Senator Bucco's task force did not include a single epidemiologist. Never mind an epidemiologist, it did not even include a single person with an MD degree. The only person with a PhD was in OSHA. It's a slap in the face to all the people who have been infected by the virus and the families that have lost loved ones to advocate such beliefs.
Thank you. Senator, since your record was brought up, let me give you 30 seconds to respond.
Sure. You know, I'm proud of the nonpartisan experts that we had. We had an industrial hygienist We had a toxicologist. We had the head of a former hospital, a large hospital, and we had other business officials from around the state. There was plenty of expertise in terms of healthcare and science to go around, and we used the evidence from that to show that businesses could open in a proper manner with the proper precautions and protocols implemented. And in fact, the governor, right after my opponent criticized me on it, the governor began to open up some of those various establishments she criticized me for.
So, Ms. Mehta, let me stay on this issue. You're a Democrat, and you generally support Governor Phil Murphy. Specifically on the governor's handling of COVID-19, can you point to any decision the governor has made that you personally disagree with?
Absolutely. I am a Democrat. I'm running as a Democratic candidate, but I will be a senator for all in the district. When we talk, there is one area of disagreement that I have, which is the ongoing concern with deaths at senior homes. The state has been working, very well to improve safeguards, including making sure there's an abundance of PPE, which is all absolutely necessary. It's also very heartening to see that Governor Murphy thinks that we need a change in leadership. All of these are very necessary steps, but we do need to understand why there were so many deaths that happened in senior homes. And if I am elected, I will use every avenue possible to get to the bottom of this, to try to understand. We need to investigate why the nursing homes had these deaths, and I will do everything I can to get to the bottom of that.
Thank you. Senator, let me let you respond to that.
Sure. The Senate Republican Caucus, which I'm a member of, we've called upon the governor to form a task force. The Senate president has agreed to form it. Rupande Mehta has been silent in supporting us in this effort. She should have joined us and sent a letter to the governor. She had every opportunity to do that. We've asked for a committee to be formed on a bipartisan basis with subpoena power to investigate this crisis. We know that over almost half of every death under COVID was from a long-term care facility. And the public deserves to have transparency here. And Rupande Mehta, while she may say that tonight, has been silent up until this point.
Thank you. And Ms. Mehta, since your platform is brought up, let me give you 30 seconds to quickly respond.
Well, Senator, I am not in the legislature. I'm simply a candidate at this point. I cannot do something that is beyond my power. You are in the Senate, and I would expect that you take the steps that are necessary to do this. If I get to the Senate, I will bring it up and I will investigate it. As of tonight, I'm only a candidate, but I look forward to changing that very soon.
Okay. Senator, you have strongly criticized the Motor Vehicle Commission for massive lines at agencies across the state. What's your plan to fix the problems that New Jerseyans are facing at this historically embattled agency?
Well, that's a great question, David. And as you know, because your publication wrote about it, I sent a letter to the Division of Motor Vehicle Commission back in early May, asking them for a reopening plan. They never responded. I sent them another letter 2 weeks later, again asking for it and giving them suggestions on how to extend licenses, to put more things online, to establish an appointment system. None of that happened. I then joined with my colleagues across the aisle to come up with bipartisan legislation to begin to address some of these problems, one of which was to establish an appointment process and to allow your driver's license photo to be extended for 12 years rather than just 8. The problem is the Motor Vehicle Commission never responded to it. And in fact, what they did for an appointment process is they gave seniors and those with underlying conditions the right to come between a certain hour. All they did was establish another line. This has been a complete lack of leadership on this point. And while my opponent says she's not in the legislature, so she couldn't do anything about it, that's baloney. When I wasn't in the legislature, I was taking on my community, taking on the legislature when I thought something wasn't going right. You don't have to be a legislator in order to speak up.
Thank you. Ms. Mehta, let me ask you this same question, which is, what is your plan for the Motor Vehicle Commission?
I think this COVID-19 has shown a spotlight on many different things, including the need to invest in our infrastructure. The COVID-19 pandemic simply overwhelmed the system. I think we need to invest more resources in the infrastructure. You said it yourself, it's an aging infrastructure, and we need to ensure that the systems are replaced. I think that's the step in the right direction, working together and making sure that we are taking care of those. But at the same time, when there is legislation being introduced to help middle-class families, to help residents in the district, to help seniors, we should also vote for that. That's something that Senator Bucco hasn't done. He's in the Senate, but he's still working against the interests of the constituents in his district.
Okay, and Senator, let me give you 30 seconds to respond.
I don't need 30 seconds. That's just simply baloney, and she knows it. It's just simply baloney.
Okay, Ms. Mehta, let's stick with the Motor Vehicle Commission just for a second, just a short follow-up. Should Governor Murphy fire the chief administrator of the Motor Vehicle Commission? Is that person up to this job?
I leave that decision to the governor, but I think that in order to sort out the system and in order to understand what went wrong, we have to take all necessary steps up to and including hiring and termination of workers. But that is something that is at the governor's discretion. If I'm in the situation where Senator Bucco is right now, I would have access to more data, more information, and more facts. I would take a look at that, and I would make my recommendations to the governor at that point.
Senator, should the governor fire the Motor Vehicle?
That's a partisan response. Yes. Motor Vehicle Commission has completely failed the residents of the state of New Jersey, and the head of that agency has had over 6 months to correct it. It hasn't happened, and the governor should take swift action now. Remove her, put somebody else in that position, and get this problem resolved.
Okay, thank you. This question is for you, Ms. Mehta. COVID has left New Jersey in a dire financial situation. The legislature approved a plan to borrow up to $10 billion. Right now, they're expecting to borrow $4.5 billion as a form of pandemic relief. Senator Bucco voted against the borrowing. How would you have voted if you were in the legislature?
COVID-19, as I said earlier, has shown a real spotlight, and that has meant that a lot of people who are suffering need access to resources. At this point in time, I think all options should be on the table. We cannot neglect any response to the people who are suffering because of this deadly pandemic. If that means that we need to look and give more aid to the people who are suffering, seniors, residents, middle-class families, frontline workers, then that is the course of action that we need to take. We simply cannot afford the failed policies of Senator Bucco. Small businesses need our assistance. We have to help everybody, and these are unprecedented times. Unprecedented times require unprecedented measures.
Thank you. Senator?
$4.5 billion was way too much money to borrow. There were only 2 states in the entire country that borrowed money under the federal program. One was Illinois. They only borrowed $1 billion. We borrowed $4.5 billion, which is going to be on the backs of our residents, which means higher taxes and a more unaffordable New Jersey than we've already seen. Let me tell you, the revenues were better than projected originally. We've seen this throughout the course of this governor's administration. The spending here has gone up 15% over 3 years. And in this particular budget, the one that my opponent supported, there was $400 million of pet Democrat projects, including $4 million for a golf course in Essex County. That, by the way, not one of the folks on the other side of the aisle will own up to putting that resolution in for that money. That's the law of the state of New Jersey. They're supposed to, during the budget process, when you ask for those, what they used to call Christmas tree items, you had to submit a resolution. To this day, the press doesn't know who put in the requests for that $400 million or the $4 million for a golf course in Essex County. That's bad policy. That's just wrong. We need transparency. But yet, my opponent, who says she's bipartisan, hasn't criticized it one bit. But I forgot, she's not in the legislature yet. So she doesn't have a voice until she gets there.
Okay. Miss Mehta, we seem to be going three on threes here, but we'll keep going. Senator Bucco said something about you, so let me give you 30 seconds.
Truth of the matter is that this budget is helping COVID-19, those affected by COVID-19, which includes small businesses, which include middle-class families, which include a lot of residents and seniors. I don't have a voice because I am not in the legislature. But Senator Bucco, you are in the legislature, and we still don't happen to hear your voice. What is missing here?
Oh, you've heard my voice. Believe me, I stood up on the floor of the legislature when this budget was passed, and I read off a whole list of reasons how it could have been better and how it could have saved the people of New Jersey money instead of costing them taxes. But then again, here we go to the same common theme with you. You were quoted on November 2nd of 2018 when you ran for freeholder in Morris County that lowering taxes is not an option. That's your direct quote from the Daily Record, November 2nd, 2018. That's not a way to run government. You can't just keep taking the easy way out with borrowing money and raising taxes and spending more than you have. We learned back in 2010 during the Great Depression that we could cut the budget in certain ways. Now, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle during that process said we'd never be able to survive, but we did.
Okay, thank you so much. And let me go back. This will be the last on this series of questions, but 30 seconds, please.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Senator Bucco, you're touting your bipartisan record, but in this case, somehow it slips. Every time it gets tough, it's just easier to resort to name calling and yelling at the other side. But somehow the bipartisan record that you keep talking about, we don't see it in these instances when it gets hard. Lowering, you referred to my statement in the Daily Record. You've been in the legislature for a very long time. How come we're seeing taxes rise up every year? I'm paying taxes more than I was. So, sorry, David, I thought you.
We're going to move on.
Okay. But let me reply to that, David, because.
Sure. 15 seconds. How's that?
15 seconds.
Okay.
My entire time in the legislature, I've never voted for a tax increase. Never voted for a tax increase and supported those measures that have stopped property taxes from skyrocketing. And I do have a bipartisan voice. My voice has been heard loud and clear, and the bills that I've sponsored, over 100 during a 10-year period, have passed a democratically controlled legislature, gone on to 2 governors' desks, and been signed into law.
Okay, thank you.
That's not bipartisanship. I don't know what is.
Senator, I want to move on. You are pro-life. And if the U.S. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, and that is something that a president whom you support wants to happen, will you cast votes in the legislature to make abortion illegal in New Jersey?
I am pro-life, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm a Roman Catholic, and that's my religious belief. But that doesn't mean that you have to be anti-women by being pro-life. I do believe that life is essential and precious, and I do believe that we should do everything we can. That's why I've sponsored legislation. The Safe Haven Bill is one of it. So women have an option to drop off an infant that maybe isn't wanted. And also the Safe Haven Education Act that allows people to be educated on what safe haven is. So life is precious to me, and I'm pro-life, and that's my religion, and that's what I am. I'm not going to hide from that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mehta, let me get your position on this.
Senator Bucco said he's not anti-women, but his record clearly reflects otherwise. He has voted against women's health care. He has voted to slash equal pay. He does not believe in equal pay for women. He's voted to not end discrimination against women. He's voted against legislation that would enable companies to get EDA funding to pay women fairly. And as we speak right now, he talks about being pro-life, and he talks about not giving women the agency they have over their own bodies by also introducing a bill in the Senate that would ban abortion after 20 weeks. A woman does not want an abortion after 20 weeks. That is way too far along in the process. And if there is a situation like that, it's only because it threatens the life, her own life, or the life of her fetus. These are all anti-women bills. This is an anti-woman record. And this is not the type of representation we need.
Thank you, Senator. Just quick.
Sure. Rupande, you should know that while I'm pro-life, I do believe that a woman we should not risk the life of a mother or the child, and I don't believe of it in cases of rape or incest. So it's not a 100% choice here. So again, you're misrepresenting my record. You've misrepresented my record on equal pay for women. I voted for one of the most stringent, comprehensive equal pay for women bills in the state's history. In 2018, the Diane Allen equal pay legislation. It's probably the most stringent in the country. I voted for it, but yet you continue to make up these things and saying, I don't support equal pay for women. I have legislation that would prohibit an insurance company from denying a claim from a woman for having a breast exam.
Okay, thank you. I want to move through it because I know.
Can I just quickly make one 15-second response?
10 seconds. Okay.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yes, you voted in favor of the Diane Allen Act in 2018, but I'm referring to the 2016 legislation that was particularly introduced for equal pay for women. The Diane Allen Act of 18 was against discrimination for anybody, all genders. That's the difference.
Senator, 10 more seconds for you.
The 2016 piece of legislation did not pass on partisan lines. In fact, there were some members of Rupande's own party that thought it was bad legislation and wouldn't help the women it was designed to protect.
Okay. And Ms. Mehta, it's one of what I'm sure are many surveys that you answer as a candidate. You address what you would do if public question number one, to legalize adult use recreational marijuana, passes. But do you support this referendum, and are you suggesting that others vote for it?
The war on drugs has not worked. I think we've poured billions and billions of dollars in the war on drugs, and it is locking up nonviolent crimes. I don't want to see an 18-year-old incarcerated because of the use of marijuana or because he possesses marijuana. That creates a lifelong system of failures for him or her that is not required. We need to ensure that our police officers are focusing on violent crimes, and those are the crimes that they help society from. I don't believe that this approach that we've had so far over the past several years has worked, and it's time for a fresh approach.
Thank you. Senator, what's your position on, I mean, I know how you voted on this, or how did you vote on this referendum when you did your ballot?
Yeah, first, let me say, I assume that Rupande then supports question number one. I voted against it, and I'll tell you why. While I support decriminalization of marijuana, I don't think people should be locked up. I've spent a lot of time in the area of drug and alcohol abuse, education, and rehabilitation. And the sheriff and I, Sheriff Jim Gannon, who has the Hope One vehicle, spend a tremendous amount of time dealing with people in recovery. I've also was the founder of Daytop, New Jersey, which is a recovery facility for those that are adolescents afflicted by drug and alcohol abuse. Every time we've been in the presence of people in recovery, the sheriff and I asked a simple question. Do you think marijuana should be legalized here in the state of New Jersey? And unanimously across the board, those in recovery have stood up and said no. They don't think legalization, recreational use of marijuana is a good idea. And for many of them, they believe that it was a gateway drug. And as a result of that, I don't support it. I'm listening to the people that were infected most by it. And that's what guided my decision.
Thank you. And Senator, you are, and we're clearly going through a theme here of issues where I think the two of you disagree. Senator, you're a supporter of the Second Amendment. You have an 87% rating from the National Rifle Association. You have not shied away from that. But you have voted for some gun safety measures in the legislature. My question to you is this: do you think that your position on gun issues reflects the views of the district that you represent?
I think when I look at those issues, I look for common sense solutions. And you're right, I voted for many common sense gun reforms in New Jersey, the elimination of bump stocks, the background checks, high velocity ammunition, So when common sense gun laws come up, I vote against them. But I also recognize that there are bad people out there that don't follow the law. So you can have every law that you can think of on the books, but there's bad folks out there that don't follow the law. So what I've done is concentrate on how to protect people. That's why I had my class 3 special police officers legislation, to be able to put a law enforcement officer in our schools and in our houses of worship. The RSVP3 program that I work with the sheriff to be able to train folks to recognize who may be somebody that may commit one of these horrible crimes, so that we can get to them before they act.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mehta, let me talk to you about guns also. What's your position?
I support the Second Amendment. Absolutely, I do. But the common sense gun legislation, you mentioned it yourself. Senator Bucco has an 87% rating from the NRA. That's incredibly high. And his common sense legislation also included voting no on making schools gun safe zones. That is not common sense legislation. How can you say that you are not going to vote for something like that and put our children in harm's way? We need to focus. We need to ensure that our schools are safe, and also make sure that folks who have weapons, who are domestic violence offenders, as an example, do not have access to weapons. I've worked as a domestic violence advocate, and I have seen so many women be afraid of their offenders because they can get easy access to guns. Senator Bucco voted for against that legislation to prevent domestic violence offenders from not having guns. These are all common sense legislations as well.
Okay, thank you. The 25th district, as you both well know, it's a Republican district, but voters have made exceptions over time. But both times the Morris County district that Senator Bucco represents, that Ms. Mehta that you're seeking to represent, they've sent Democrats to the Senate. And those Democrats emerged as they were effective legislators. They were intellectuals. They were liberal lions of the Senate at the time. And I'm talking about Steve Wiley and Gordon McGinnis. But both times when they returned home to Morris County to seek second terms, voters soundly rejected them. And in the case of Senator McGinnis, it was your father, Senator, who unseated him. My question is about a bigger picture, which is in 2020 and 2021, in the era that we're in right now, is it possible for a senator to go to Trenton and vote their conscience without having to worry about whether they're going to get reelected? And let me start with Ms. Mehta and ask you to go first.
Sure. So I do believe that there is definitely scope for this district to be turned and to stay that way. I am going to be an independent voice in the Senate. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a candidate of the Democratic Party, but I am not going there to simply voice the beliefs of the Democratic Party, regardless of what Senator Bucco wants others to believe. I will be working for both Democrats, Republicans, and every other resident in my district. In fact, I have bipartisan support for my candidacy from Democrats and several Republicans in the district right now. Senator Bucco was appointed, not elected, and I do believe that it's time for a fresh voice in this district that lines itself in lockstep with the constituents and votes for their interests, not for partisan legislation.
And Senator, let me get your response to that.
David, thank you. First, let me say, I think I misspoke on the last thing. I think as I was running through the gun legislation, I think I said I voted against common sense gun legislation, which obviously is incorrect. I voted for common sense gun legislation, as you rightfully pointed out. So I just wanted to make sure that that's accurately reflected in the dialogue here. Look, this is an election cycle like no other. And people should recognize that the New Jersey Constitution was written in such a way, and David, I'm sure you recognize this, that state legislative races would not take place during years when the president was at the top of the ticket, so that people could distinguish between what federal issues and state issues. Unfortunately, because my father passed away, this legislative race, the only one in the state, is put squarely against what the Constitution wanted to prevent. And as a result of that, I constantly see my opponent trying to mix in the federal issues and different things like that. It's unfortunate because I think people really need to focus on where the state is right now And I think if you look at my record, it is bipartisan. I couldn't have gotten 100 pieces of legislation through a democratically controlled legislature onto a governor's desk and signed if I didn't work across the aisle. And I think that the people recognize that. I think they recognize that I'm hardworking, and I think they'll return me to office to finish out the legacy that my father has started and continued here in the 25th district.
Okay, thank you. At this point in the debate, it's time for each candidate.
Can I make a quick comment, if possible?
He didn't really attack you. So let's move on.
All right.
Plenty of
I tried.
At this point in the debate, it's an opportunity for each candidate to ask one question of their opponent. Under the guidelines, the incumbent is going to go first. Senator, you'll have 30 seconds to ask your question. Your opponent will have 1 minute to respond, and you will then have 30 seconds, if you wish, to offer a rebuttal. So, Senator Bucco, let me ask you for your question.
Sure. The pandemic presented many The pandemic presented many round-the-clock challenges, particularly in the early days of COVID. As a senator, I dealt with resolving unemployment claims, helping businesses, getting PPE and food to the most vulnerable, and more. Before COVID, Rupande, you failed to show up for the one public job you were entrusted with, despite promoting that job in your campaign mailers earlier in this year. The New Jersey Globe found you missed 89% of the Denville committee meetings that you were appointed to represent. If you couldn't even show up then, why would voters expect you to show up now?
Okay, so go ahead and respond.
Thank you. As most committee members will tell you, most of the work takes place behind the scenes, usually via Facebook or email. I did the same thing. My husband has a very rigorous travel schedule that has only now been suspended due to COVID-19, and I have a very young child. Taking care of her needs means volunteering activities take a backseat. If, however, you, Senator Bucco, are so concerned about my meeting absences, like your mailers have consistently shown, you should have voted to provide more resources for working families, for mothers, and women. Also, your mailers falsely assert this as my public job, when in reality, it is a volunteering position. Also, Senator, my name is Rupande, not Rupanda.
Okay. Senator, would you like to respond to that?
I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Your mailers did that.
But I can tell you this. I spoke to one of the committee members that served on that committee with you just the other day. And he said that you weren't there 24 out of 27% of the time. And in fact, the committee members all recognized that fact, that you weren't working behind the scenes. You just weren't showing up. So that's a real problem. I mean, if you're given a position of trust, you have to be there. And by the way, I voted for the legislation to allow women to use their campaign funds to hire a babysitter so that they could attend their public meetings.
Okay,
Sorry.
I want to move on because this was Senator Bucco's rebuttal. It's time for you to ask a question of Senator Bucco, and you can ask him anything you want.
Senator Bucco, do you still support Donald Trump?
I support the Republican ticket, but I can tell you this. My technique and my leadership is way different than Donald Trump's. I've worked very hard to bring people together, and my style is different, and it's been effective. I've also not been afraid to disagree with the president when I felt that he's wrong. For instance, I've supported wearing a mask. I think this COVID crisis is real, and it's a problem, and we need to take care of it. As I said just on Friday night, I have a mom who's got Parkinson's disease, and I have underlying conditions as a result of being a cancer survivor. So I take it really seriously. I wear a mask, and our styles are completely different. But I support the Republican ticket.
And Ms. Mehta, you have an option to respond if you'd like to.
That sounds to me like you support Donald Trump, and it is absolutely overwhelmingly ununderstandable for me how you can support a Republican ticket or a Republican president who is responsible, singularly responsible for so many deaths in our country, and so many families have lost loved ones here in New Jersey.
Thank you. Ms. Mehta, you arguably paint Senator Bucco as a right-wing extremist, but he's won the endorsements of the New Jersey Education Association and the AFL-CIO. These are not exactly bastions of the right. How do you square what you say about Mr. Bucco with endorsements that he's received from unions that align mostly with the Democratic Party?
Thank you. David, the establishment usually likes the establishment. These are organizations that are establishment. Senator Bucco is establishment. There's obviously fear in supporting somebody who is from the outside, but I'm looking to change that very soon. So I will continue to work in a bipartisan manner. Senator Bucco has not been an example of that. He's been a hyper-partisan in the Senate and towed the party line 100% of the time. I will work as an independent voice for all the residents in the district.
Thank you. Senator, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. I don't think the NJEA just supports incumbents. And I think that my record has proven, with the support of the PBA, the FMBA, business leaders around the state, all of these folks recognize the hard work that I've put in, especially during this COVID crisis. And they've rewarded me with that endorsement. But I've also been endorsed by the local newspapers in every single one of the municipalities in the 25th Legislative District. Why? Because they've also seen my bipartisan work, my forethought, my ability to work across the aisle, to bring people together. I'm a very, very fiscal conservative. I have never voted for a tax increase, and I am a budget hawk when it comes to spending. But I'm also a social moderate, which means that I support many items that are in concurrence with my colleagues across the aisle. That's why I've been able to get things done. And I've also been a person that have been able to take an issue that may have split the parties and work it to bring it together so that it can pass on along bipartisan lines. And that's what we really need in Trenton today.
Thank you. Senator, during your first 8 years in the state assembly, you were a close ally of Governor Chris Christie. He's your friend. He's also your constituent. Democrats have criticized you for being, and these are their words, not mine, an obedient lapdog. But people do evolve. Are there any votes that you cast during those 8 years that you wish now that you could take back?
I can tell you there are votes that I cast that were not in lockstep with the governor. The gas tax legislation, additional borrowing for the Transportation Trust Fund. So it's not even having the wish that would I take some back. I was an independent voice down there, and let me tell you, there were plenty of times when my phone rang before I even got out of the State House to let the governor let me know that he wasn't happy with my vote and that he was my constituent. But that's the way I am. I'm not afraid to stand up if I think something is wrong. And I've done that. I've proven that. And, I think the governor will tell you that as well.
Thank you. Ms. Mehta, let me get your response to that also.
Thank you. So, Senator, you mentioned that you've worked on about 100 bipartisan bills over the next 10 years. If my math is accurate, and I'm pretty decent at it, that counts to about 10 bills a year. That does not seem like the kind of work that a legislator should be doing on a bipartisan basis, working for the residents and the constituents in his district. And in terms of getting endorsements from PBA and other newspapers, the organizations may support you, but I have received support from several in the rank and the file of the PBA and many of these organizations, including the NJEA. The newspaper endorsement sounds wonderful, but it's very easy to obtain an endorsement like that when the newspaper hasn't even made any attempts to contact me or my campaign.
Okay, thank you.
Wait a minute, David.
Yeah.
They made no effort to contact you? In the very paper in which we were endorsed, there's a whole article of your conversation with them. You got to be truthful, Rupande. You got to be truthful.
Senator, I I have not spoken to them, unfortunately. No, I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay. Ms. Mehta, let me ask you this. There are calls to defund police have become an issue in the 2020 campaign across the country. You live in Denville. It's a relatively safe community where the police budget's a little over $4 million a year plus another $1 million for equipment and vehicles. Do you think the town that you live in spends too much or too little on police? And would you support defunding aspects of the Denville Police Department?
I do not believe in the term defunding the police, David. I think it's misleading, and I frankly actually think it's incorrect. I think what we need to do is look at investing in our communities so we create more opportunities for our residents. If this means more job opportunities, more education opportunities, I'm all for that. In addition, we also need to ensure that our police officers have the tools they need to do their job effectively. This means a person trained in de-escalation techniques, access to body cameras, implicit bias training programs, and mental health resources, because I recognize that our officers are subjected to a very difficult job every day. And Senator Bucco keeps touting his law enforcement support. He talked about his PBA support not too long ago. But in 2011, he voted for Bill S-2937 that removed the cost of living adjustments for our police officers and firefighters. And at the same time, he also did not vote for legislation that would provide home buyer incentives. I stand in favor of all this legislation. I am in favor of supporting our police officers and our firefighters.
Thank you. Senator, let me give you an opportunity to speak on this.
Sure. I voted against the cost of living adjustments because back in 2010, we just couldn't afford it. The state was going bankrupt and we had to make some tough decisions, and that was one of them. And believe me, it wasn't a popular one. But I had to do it because it was right for my constituents to stop the property tax increases that were going on. People just couldn't afford it. But let me say this: Rupande talks a good talk, but in 2018, when she was running for freeholder, she suggested, along with her other candidates, that the sheriff's office, that his budget be cut and the money should be given to the arts. Well, nobody supports the arts more than I do. But just think about what would have happened if they would have been elected and she would have taken away the money from the sheriff's office that funded the Hope One vehicle that deals with opioid crisis and drug abuse, with the homeless programs, with all of the other programs that the sheriff's office supports today. Today, more than ever, during this COVID crisis, we would have been lost without those programs if that money had been taken away, as she suggested.
Okay. And let me give you 30 seconds to respond to that.
Thank you. Senator Bucco, I never said that. You are twisting and falsifying my words. And
I've got the article right here. I've got the article right here.
There is no sentence there that says take money from the law enforcement and give it to the arts. I know exactly the article we're talking about. Can I please finish?
Sure.
I'm speaking. These tactics of exaggerating, this Trump-like tactics of exaggerating, are the reason why people in the district are looking to change politicians such as yourself and replace them with people like me, who they know will stand up for them and for nobody else.
Okay, let me go back to Senator Bucco. I knew you wanted to say something.
Look, she hasn't been truthful on 90% of the things she said. You can't just make broad statements like that, especially even talking about equal pay for women, when I just recently voted for a piece of legislation that was probably one of the most comprehensive in the country.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mehta, let me ask you, and this moved much more quickly than I thought it would, at least maybe for me, not necessarily for the two of you, but I want to ask you a question. I'm making an assumption that you're in agreement with national Democrats that President Trump should not have nominated a replacement for Justice Ginsburg so close to the election. So my question is this: if you are in the Senate next year, a gubernatorial election year, and there is a vacancy on the New Jersey Supreme Court, would you support Governor Murphy nominating a replacement?
See, the fact of the matter is that Mitch McConnell said that that's how he stopped Merrick Garland from getting to the Supreme Court. And now we're this close. We're 9 days away. They have still not gotten Justice Amy Coney Barrett into the Supreme Court, and they're rushing through the appointment to get through the process to get her through there. That is not how things are supposed to go. The next president should have a say in how this goes. I support that form of belief. I believe that this close to the election, the next president should be able to make a decision on who goes to the Supreme Court.
Okay, Senator Bucco, let me get a response.
I don't think she answered the question. The question was, would she stand up against Governor Murphy and stop him from nominating somebody?
Okay. Ms. Mehta, do you want to respond to that?
I made my response very clear. This close to the election, the next president should have a chance.
But we're not talking about the president. We're talking about the governor. Silence, just like everything else. Silence, just like everything else.
I'm going to move on to the next question. This will be the last before closing statements. This election is 9 days away, and Senator, we all recognize that this is a result of a sad and heavy loss for you and your family. You would have preferred circumstances be different, clearly. My question is this, Senator. About 35 years ago, New Jersey changed the law covering vacancies in the legislature. It used to be that if there was a vacancy, there'd be a special election and maybe a certain number of days after, but it would happen in a reasonable amount of time. Instead, the law was changed. It allowed the political party to fill the seat until the next scheduled election. Senator, my question is, has this worked, or should the legislature consider going back to the old way of allowing voters to pick who represents them in Trenton?
Well, I mean, first of all, one of the things that my opponent suggests is that, this is a rare occasion that somebody fills an unexpired term by appointment. It's not. We know that a great majority, and you know this for a fact, David, that a great majority of the folks that are currently sitting in the legislature started their careers by an appointment through the county committee. That's just a fact. If you look at the numbers, that's just the fact. But, I think that I would be open to looking at that if that was something that was brought up. I'd be open-minded to see, because let me tell you, this has had a real major impact on me. In my situation, though, I'm not sure if that would have worked, because I was in the middle of an election that they couldn't get me off the ballot to change. So I was in a really tough situation, because I ended up having to run for an office that everyone knew I would never fill. But you couldn't just step away, because you had to give the voters a choice.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mehta, let me ask you to respond to that.
Being appointed to the county committee is not the same as being appointed to the state senate. I can't believe I even have to say that. But you could have stepped away. This is an issue for last year's election. You could have stepped away. You could have named a replacement, and that person could have been on the ballot. But that did not happen.
That's simply not true.
I'm speaking. You could have let somebody else take your place and let voters decide then. The voters would still have decided. But your concern was and you said this in last year's debate, your concern was to make sure that this seat stays Republican. And you were willing to go to any length and breadth to do that, including this year, as you're twisting my words, falsifying things I have said, and in general, exaggerating and not being able to say things the way they were.
Go back to you.
David, again, it's simply not true. The ballots had already been printed. Everything was done. There was no way to get me off of the ballot last year. And that's a fact. That's an absolute fact. And yes, I did say that I thought it was important to keep the seat in Republican hands. Why? Because the legislature is so heavily Democrat now. You need a check and balance down in Trenton so that things get closer to the middle. You can shake your head no, but that's the truth. Right now, the legislature is so heavily weighted to the Democratic Party that nothing ever comes to the middle, because the Republicans just don't have a say. So in order to have a check and balance for the folks of New Jersey, I don't know what's so funny. In order to have a check and balance here in New Jersey, you need to have some opposition. You need to have, that brings out transparency. It makes for better government to have opposing views.
Senator,
I don't know why you think that's so funny.
we're going to move on.
It's fine.
I want to. It's now time to move to the closing statements. I promised everybody that this debate would be over at 8:30. So to remind everybody, 90 seconds for a closing statement. We'll start with Senator Bucco and finish with Ms. Mehta. So, Senator, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm proud of my service in the legislature and the state of New Jersey. I was born and raised in this legislative district, and no one knows the area or its leaders better. I've fought hard to make sure that my district continues to be the best place to live, work, and raise a family. My common sense approach to addressing issues like affordability, keeping our families safe, fighting the opioid crisis, improving education, and protecting the developmentally disabled has led to me being endorsed by the NJEA, police and firemen, the business community, and many others. I've been called a champion for the disabled, and I've been endorsed by the New Jersey Hills newspaper, which represents all of the local newspapers and municipalities in this district. This is not an easy job. Being a senator is tough, and especially during this COVID crisis. You got to show up, you got to roll up your sleeves and get to work. You got to be able to stand up and represent your constituents. I've done that. This is not the time for on-the-job training, and it certainly isn't the time to send someone to Trenton when they were given an opportunity and entrusted with a position in their community, didn't show up 89% of the time. I look forward to continuing to represent the residents of the 25th Legislative District, and I'll continue to roll up my sleeves and get to work and show up just like they've come accustomed to.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Mehta, let me ask you to give your closing statement.
Thank you once again to the New Jersey Globe for holding this important discussion, and thank you all for listening in. It is clear District 25 needs a new leader. Anthony Bucco has been in Trenton for a decade, and all he has learned is how to be a better politician. In between looking around to see how other people are voting, taking direction from party leaders like Governor Christie, and refusing to even say one negative word about President Trump while he continues to lead us further into tragedy, Anthony Bucco has prioritized his politics over the residents of the 25th District. He would rather you focus on my absence as a volunteer on a local committee due to childcare needs, something he voted against, than his abysmal record as a state legislator. The other night, Anthony Bucco said, the easiest way to find out if something is a bad piece of legislation is to watch across the aisle and see how those in competitive districts vote. If I'm able to earn your vote, I promise to determine if a piece of legislation is bad by reading it, weighing its consequences, and deciding if it's the best decision. I believe in doing so, I will be able to avoid the types of bad decisions based on political calculations that led to slashing women's healthcare and refusing to provide critical assistance to small businesses. It would be my biggest honor to represent the constituents of the district. My name is Rupande Mehta, and this election, I'm asking for your vote for District 25 State Senate. Please return your vote by mail ballot on or before November 3rd. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you both for
Thank you, David.
This brings the New Jersey Globe 25th District State Senate debate between Senator Anthony Bucco and Democratic challenger Rupande Mehta to a close. The New Jersey Globe will be back at 9 o'clock tonight with a debate for the 5th District congressional seat with Congressman Josh Gottheimer and Republican Frank Pallotta. And on Tuesday night at 5 p.m., the New Jersey Globe will host our last of 6 debates for 2020. It's the first and only debate for the United States Senate between Cory Booker and Rick Mehta. Thank you both, Senator Bucco, Ms. Mehta, for participating in the debate tonight. Good luck to both of you. Please stay safe and please be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice night.